Before we start, I want to apologize for my video not being on. I'm having some difficulties with my camera operation. I'm sure throughout the past 18 months, we've encountered this a number of times, and it happens on the times that you do not want it to happen. So I apologize to the public and to those of you who are tuning in. I'm going to continuously try to work on that so that I can restore my video. So welcome to the Citizens Oversight Board quarterly public forum. It's a pleasure to have you on tonight, and we're absolutely grateful for the opportunity and the platform to be able to share with you what is going on, what we've been working on, and from time to time bring those individuals into these quarterly public forums that can answer the questions that you have, and you have the opportunity to ask these different city leaders questions that are on your mind. First, I want to recognize and welcome our Director of Public Safety, Murphy Robinson, who is on with us tonight. Welcome, Director Robinson.
Thank you, sir.
It's a pleasure to have you. From the Department of Safety Office, we also have Elise Ron. Did I say that right, Ron? Elise Ron. And we also have Emily Luck. Pleasure to have you. And tonight we have, we're joined by the members of the Citizens Oversight Board. We have, these are members, Terrence Carroll. We have our Vice Chair, Julia Richmond. We have Dr. April Alexander, Katina Banks. We also have Karen Collier. We have Stephen Stein. We have also Nikki Brazil. And these are the members, and yours truly. My name is Al Gardner. I am the chair for the Citizens Oversight Board. Just a real quick overview of what we do. I'm going to tell you the three things because sometimes the public is not always fully aware of kind of the type of work that we do as a Citizens Oversight Board. The Citizens Oversight Board practices civilian oversight in Denver. Civilian oversight is an evolving field designed to provide communities with a voice in how law enforcement is conducted. We do these three things mainly. We make policy recommendations to the Denver Police Department and the Denver Sheriff's Department on topics including discipline, use of force, training, community relations, hiring, rules, and complaint processes. The second thing is we address other issues of concern to the community or the board, the monitor, the manager of safety, the chief of police, the undersheriff, or the fire chief. And number three, we assess the effectiveness of the monitor's office. The COB consists of 9 Denver residents appointed by the mayor and city council. The board meets twice monthly on the first and third Fridays of the month from 10 a.m. to noon. In the office of the independent monitor, well, now we're still having virtual meetings, so not in public yet. We were created by city ordinance in 2004. It was added to the city charter by ballot measure in 2016. The body is governed both by internal bylaws and the Denver Revised Municipal Code. So it's just a quick overview of what we do as a body. What we want to do is I'll allow at this point, we want to kick it off with, since we have, Director Murphy on, we'll turn things over to him and allow him there again to introduce his staff as it pertains to how they, what they will be representing tonight and what they would be speaking on.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Gardner. I appreciate you, and I'm happy to be here with the COB once again to talk about what we're doing in Denver. I'm going to start off by just giving a brief overview. I will say I do have some very very wonderful staff with me today. Elise Ron, who is our Government Affairs and Community Affairs Manager, as well as Emily Locke, who's our Director for Transformation and Policy. So thank you all for joining tonight. And I do believe on the call as well, not in this part of the forum, but I want to acknowledge Mary Delacki, who is my Chief Deputy, as well as Daleen Mix, who is a Deputy Director as well. So just wanted to give a brief overview and then open it up for questions of what we're dealing with here in the Department of Public Safety. Number one thing I wanted to talk about, or I think that was asked of me, was the vaccine mandate and what does that look like for the Department of Safety. It's been rough for us because, as you know, that there is a lot of complexity when it comes to the vaccinations and the mandate that was brought upon us by the Department of Health. However, we have been working very diligently to move the needle on this with our staff, help them understand why it's important and why, and when you're serving the public, why something like this matters. And so, we continue to push and hope that all of our employees will get vaccinated, and of course. Unfortunately, there will be consequences if not, but I'm hoping that all city employees, not just public safety, but all 16,000 city employees get their vaccinations here soon. And so we have seen numbers in the 80s for Denver Fire Department, 80 percentage points, and 70s for their vaccinations. And then in the 60s as well as the 50s for the PD and the Sheriff Department. And so, as you see, there's room for improvement in all the departments. But we are hoping that I'm encouraging all of our employees to move forward with their vaccinations. The next thing I wanted to talk to you all about was recruitment and staffing. That is one of the largest challenges that we see today. We have had a really difficult time recruiting for all of our public safety agencies, specifically DPD, DFD, Denver Fire Department, Denver Police Department, as well as, and almost foremost, the Denver 911 office. It is a really tough job to be a dispatcher today in today's world. What we are finding is people treat dispatchers differently than they used to. And so there's a mental strain that comes with that job that is more apparent today than it used to be. And so we have seen a record number of dispatchers quit the job, as well as not as good of numbers of people applying for the job due to all the things that happened last year and the things that are happening this year and the increased, I would say, verbal violence that our dispatchers are seeing. And so we continue to recruit and try and make that job the most competitive as possible. But that has been a challenge for us. And so we continue to see what we can do there to be not only competitive in the marketplace, but also make the job desirable. I also would say the police department, fire department has done a phenomenal job really kicking in recruiting efforts across the board, whether it's in different parts of the country or a diverse population of people. I was so proud when I walked into the Denver Fire Department Academy this last week and saw that a vast majority of the people in the fire academy it was just a diverse population. I mean, it was people of all different backgrounds, and that was just very cool to see. And so we will continue to recruit for the classes coming up in this year and the following year, and we will make sure that we are intentional about recruiting as we have seen a dip in our numbers across the board, not only in the police department, fire department, but also the sheriff's department. I would like to say congratulations to the 8 recruits that graduated the sheriff's department just this last week, I believe it was. But we will continue to have more recruits coming in the sheriff's office. And so the last thing I wanted to bring as part of my regular updates before I get into the questions that were kind of given beforehand was that I have ordered a comprehensive review of the discipline process for not only the PID, but the fire department and the police department. And where that comes out of is since I've been in this position, I know that we had a lot of conversations about how to improve areas of discipline and whatnot, but I have not had the opportunity, given all the world things that have happened, to have that comprehensive review of the processes themselves. And so I have asked my staff to take a look at that and to see where we can lean in and do better, not only in staffing and the processes and the policies and all those things, but also how do we make sure that everyone understands what the policies are? How do we make sure that the public sees and knows what the policies are, but also our officers? And so that comprehensive review has started, and this is more of a process review. It is there to make sure that we are not just okay with status quo, and so that we are continuing to look at what all those disciplinary processes look like. So we have done that. We are in the midst of that, and I will keep you all updated as we get the results of that review. So then I would ask this, Mr. Chair Gardner.
Yeah.
I got a few questions that you all wanted me to. Do you want me to stop here?
I tell you what. Yeah, let's. How many? You have the 3 questions there. You have the current complaint process. Okay. Yeah. I tell you what. Let's open it up for a minute just to see if anyone has any questions. Just for a minute, and we'll give any seconds. Do we have any questions out there from the public on anything?
I know for myself, and I think this is kind of the question coming about regarding the process review, is just centered around accountability. So I know I pick on poor Emily all the time with this, but what does your kind of timeline look like for this process review? And kind of thinking about how it's executed and who's going to be responsible for these different points of review.
Yeah, so this is a review for me, and I want to make that very clear. This is a review for me from my staff. And so this will happen in the next month. I've given about 30 days for this, and then I will share with you all the results. But this is more of an internal review to really understand what are some areas in process improvement. And then I plan on talking. I apologize, my light keeps going out. So, but I plan on bringing those some of those results to you all and getting your feedback on what things we can change in terms of the process or keep the same. But I do want that to be clear that this is not a big, hire someone else from the outside and do, that's not what this is. This is more of a just, hey, I haven't had the chance since I've been in this position to really review how we do business in this area, and I would like to do that.
And this is a question from the audience. And again, I think this is going to be part of your review process, or should be. When complaints come in, why does the public never hear back? I know of more than one complaint about DPD and never heard back. So again, for people who are filing these complaints, going months on end without hearing some of the outcomes, I think has been an issue brought up by community.
Thank you. And I don't have a baseline for the answer for that. I do believe that at least the complaints that have come to my office, I always make sure that we circle back with the complainant. But in terms of across the board, if a complaint comes in, that'll be part of the review, April. Thank you, because that I absolutely believe that people should be contacted and notified of the result of that complaint.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that came up, at least at our last quarterly public forum, is just providing that trajectory of when does a complaint come in, who's responsible, how's it handled, when does the person hear back. So I know for myself as a board member and trying to represent community, just wanting to know what that pathway looks like for these complaints is really ideal. I know people were wanting it today, but definitely in this review process.
So I can pause here and give that pathway.
That would be great.
It's important to know that most, if not all, complaints that we receive, I direct straight to the independent monitor's office. And the reason being is I want to make sure that the independent monitor has transparent eyes on all of those complaints that come to us. And so then the independent monitor gets those complaints and forwards the complaints to the Internal Affairs Bureau or the Sheriff's Department for review, but monitors that complaint throughout. And so that has been the process, and that is the process. But I also like to, when I get a complaint, and sometimes, let's just say, sometimes complaints aren't to the place where they're going to be forwarded to the monitor. For example, if someone says, "Hey, I just had an officer kind of look at me wrong," or whatever that is, something that we can handle. I usually like to try and get back to that person personally if we see that. But if it's a formal complaint and it's a complaint that is not easily handled, we absolutely forward every single one of those to the independent monitor's office. As a matter of fact, we actually encourage people to go directly to the independent monitor's office to give those complaints. That way, there's no filtering, there's no expectation of having to say something more than once, if that makes sense. So that is the process there for the police department and the sheriff's department. There is is the independent monitor on? I would love to.
No.
Okay.
The interim, Greg is not on tonight. No.
Okay. Well, I think I don't want to speak to his process because I know that he has an entire process that he has to monitor those and to get back to people. So I will yield to the independent monitor on those, but I also will lean in on our side to make sure that we're following up to April's point, because I do think it's our responsibility to do that because there are complaints about our department. So. Sure.
All right. Thank you, Director Robinson. Thank you, April, for those two questions. I want to move this way, make sure we leave enough time. And one of those questions were the overview of the current complaint process, which we've been kind of hitting on, including but this goes a little bit deeper because it's including investigations and discipline, particularly as conducted by the Public Integrity Division, or as we know it as the PID. So could you dive into that a little bit more, and then we'll open it up for about 2-3 questions, and then we'll go to the next.
Absolutely. And I might yield, if I miss something, Emily Locke, I'm going to ask you to chime in here because Emily knows the process 10 times better than I do. But when we get a complaint and/or when we find that we need to open up a case in on the Sheriff's Department for the PID, it goes into an investigatory process, and it's investigated by, I believe, the AIU. And the AIU, that is help me with what the acronym means, Emily.
I believe it's Administrative Investigations Unit.
I was about to say that, but then I was like, I'm going to just butcher this. So I'm happy I didn't. So the Administrative Investigations Unit takes that process, takes that investigation, investigates it, and then it gives it to the CRU. Emily?
Conduct Review Unit.
Thank you. And the CRU then makes a recommendation to the sheriff on what the discipline should be based on the circumstance from their perspective. This is all before the process of the employee being able to tell their side of the story. And so once that process happens, that they look at the case file, they meet with the employee, and then they make that recommendation. And then the employee has a chance to tell their side of the story with their union rep or with the representative that they choose. And then the sheriff makes a recommendation to my office, which is my I have a commissions and accountability office, and they take that recommendation from the sheriff and decide whether we agree or disagree. And there's some times where we agree, and there's sometimes where we disagree. But that is the purpose of my office and my job as the civilian oversight of public safety. A lot of folks don't know that, but that is this job. That is who I am, as civilian oversight. And so the sheriff, actually, the police chief, fire chief, don't have the ability to execute discipline on their own. It actually has to come to my office. And so once that recommendation is made, we look at the totality of circumstances and either agree or disagree. And so that is the process. And then there's also an appeals process from there. And that appeals process also involves the career service committee. And so that is a very quick synopsis of the process, Al.
Thank you. And that's AIU, then CRU, and then it's PID. Where does the PID come in as part?
No, PID is the Public Integrity Division. And that is okay. All of those that's both of those units combined. It is the
there
office.
We go.
That's the office.
Okay. I wanted to make that clear because I know that was part of the question there. Okay. Perfect. All right. Now we'll open it up for questions. Karen?
Can Al, real quick, before we go to Karen's question, I just wanted to say this. I forgot to mention that the entire time, the independent monitor has access to and is monitoring that discipline. And at the time where the sheriff is meeting with the employees and whatnot, the independent monitor weighs in and gives his recommendations or her recommendations based on who we are about to get to what that discipline should be as well. That's a huge part that I actually missed, but the independent monitor is a part of that discipline process throughout.
Thank you. Karen?
I'm sorry, that was the question I was going to ask him. Where are you saying the Office of Independent Monitor gets involved?
So they get involved from the get-go. They have access to the entire case from the start of the case, but they also sit in where you hear them being most vocal. And when I hear from them is especially when they disagree with the sheriff. And then I put in a rule where if the independent monitor disagrees with the sheriff at any time, or the police chief at any time, that case file actually doesn't go through my staff anymore. It comes to me. And I have a direct conversation with the independent monitor. And there have been times where I've overturned a sheriff or a chief's decision based on what the monitor has told me. And so, but they are there through the entire process, actually. They do tend to be more vocal at the end when they give their opinion of what discipline should be.
So how does the Office of Independent Monitor get notice of a formal complaint as it goes to PID? Is that the
usually the Office of Independent Monitor should be getting that complaint, and they give it to the PID. I mean, that is how it should work. But oftentimes when the sheriff's office receives those complaints, they should be getting notified by the PID as well as by the sheriff's office. There have been some issues with notification. I don't think that's been an issue in terms of getting the complaint notifications, but I do know there has been other issues with notifications with big cases. And I have rectified that with some recent policy. And so we have worked very hard to make sure the sheriff's office understands it is their responsibility, not anybody else's, not the PID, not your cousin, I don't care who it is. They are responsible at the time of an incident to notify the independent monitor. Matter of fact, I put it in the policy that we rolled out this last week that they have 1 hour to notify the independent monitor. Doesn't matter what time of day.
Thank you. Any other COB members have a question before we go to the community? We'll take a couple of questions there. Julia?
Just to follow up on one of the community questions, you talked about the internal review Do you intend to provide that review to the public? And if so, in what format and sort of by when do you expect that to be complete?
That's a good question. I have not, my internal review was actually not intended to go to the public from get-go. However, I will be bringing it to this body for review, but I did not intend to make this a overarching kind of grandiose review that would be something that is even disseminated by the public. I don't know what we're going to find in it. It was a kind of an open-ended direction to my staff to say, I haven't done a real look at these processes while I've been in the seat. That's what I want to do. And so there was no exact scope that says this is what you're looking to find, or this is what you're, this is the problems I have. And so I would not say I feel comfortable saying, yes, I'm going to just share everything with the public, because there may not be much to share with the public. And so I will, however, be coming to the COB to let you all know what I find and see if there's something that we should be sharing with the public, if that makes sense. I just don't know what the scope will end up being, or what we're going to find to want to look more into, if that makes sense. This is more my style of management. Once we have a process, I believe every couple years or every few years or however long, you should be reviewing that process.
And just to be clear, internally, you guys perform that audit or that review. Members of your staff, you didn't go to someone external to come in and take a look at it. This was performed by members of your staff, right?
Yes, it's performed by one of my assistant deputy, Armando Soldate, who is a storied career person in doing these type of things. So.
Okay, got it. Thank you. April, any questions? Can I take a couple of them from the community, Karen, and then we'll come back. Thank you.
Sorry, just one that has been a common question. What happens to these cases during the times without an independent monitor? We do have an interim independent monitor, just for everybody to know. So the OIM's office is still proceeding with taking those complaints from the public. That has not stopped, even though we are on the search for a new independent monitor. I don't know if Al or Murphy wants to co-sign that or provide any other.
I certainly will. I hear from Greg in writing as well as verbally all the time about cases, but also just about everyday business. So absolutely, we are in contact with the independent monitor's office almost daily.
And April, that question was in regard to how responsive the independent monitor is. I'm sorry, I missed that first part.
People were just wondering, we don't have a permanent independent monitor right now.
Got it.
So what's going on? So I was just letting them know we have an interim who is still addressing.
Yeah, I'll just add something to that. Just because someone hasn't necessarily been directly appointed doesn't mean that Greg Crittenden, our interim independent monitor, doesn't have the full scope of responsibility and activities of the independent monitor's office. We're fortunate that we have an interim independent monitor that has been in the office and worked with the office for a number of years and is very well versed in all of the moving parts that deal with the Department of Safety. So I feel very confident, and the community should feel very confident that there aren't being any balls dropped in terms of abilities of the independent monitor to properly monitor or handle these complaints. Thanks. We'll take one more.
Yeah, the next set of questions, I think this does have to do with the complaint process. It's surrounding the food provider for the jail system. And I'll just read one of these because I just want to use the person's language and their experiences. The conditions at the downtown Denver jail are grossly inhumane. I speak with people who are caged there multiple times a week. Since Airmark has come on, reports of food conditions include rotten spoiled food, sour milk, which as a result, they've now replaced with powdered soy milk that does not dissolve because they don't give them hot water to dissolve it. And just last week, both a spider and a screw found in people's food. Calorie counts are not meeting standards. So I know this has been a vocal kind of concern about the food provider Airmark in the community, and what we know of Airmark and the quality of their food. So we've had a few questions responding to that.
Well, I will tell you this is the first time I'm hearing of this. And it's of grave concern to me because number one, we just started this contract with Airmark. Number two, there's no tolerance. I have no tolerance for that. And so you have my word that I will be looking into this COB and I will be back to you on this, because that is not appropriate, nor will I stand for that kind of behavior of having spoiled milk or screws and food. I mean, that's awful. And so I will be looking into this. I have not heard this before.
Can I ask you this, Director Robinson? When you come to our next COB meeting, would you be prepared to outline the complaint process that inmates have to follow when they run into these sorts of issues? I'm sure that, especially if we have any community members that would join us on our next call, to really understand it, right? Because if there's a complaint that's going out, and that means that more than likely it's a family member or a friend that's voicing this, I'm sure it'd be beneficial and helpful if we understood that process.
Can I do that now, sir? I actually have that
Sure.
information and know that information.
Even better, even better.
So when an inmate or a person that's incarcerated rather has a grievance or a problem with something a deputy did or conditions of the jail, the appropriate way to file that is to fill out what they call a kite and or a grievance. And there's a form that you can fill out in the jail, and then you give that to the supervisor in the jail. The other ways that you can do it is you can contact the PID or the Office of the Independent Monitor. Oftentimes, the Office of the Independent Monitor is contacted. I'll also tell you another way to do this is I have gotten many letters from inmates. And if there is a complaint in that letter, I have that complaint investigated. And one of them, I'll give you an example, talked to me about a condition of a shower. I went myself that same day I got it to that shower and saw what they were talking about. There was a sharp edge on the shower and with one of the tiles, and they said they couldn't get it replaced. I went down, I looked at it, and I said, why have we not gotten this replaced? And they had that fixed immediately. Shouldn't have to come to me. I agree, it shouldn't have to come to me, but it did, and I rectified it. I do know, though, that formal complaint process through the KITE program and the grievance program, that is how we get the vast majority of our complaints from, or our issues from people that are incarcerated.
Thank you.
Just as a follow-up, can that also come from community members like the one who just asked that question?
Absolutely.
Obviously, this person I kind of know is in and out of jail supporting incarcerated individuals who some can't speak for themselves. So I'm wondering if they can represent and do a complaint as well.
So here's what I will say is as much detail as possible, please give it to us. Because if someone just says, for example, the food is bad, I want to know when this happened, what kind of food it was, because then, I can pinpoint what is happening, and we can actually take and rectify these things, and who was working and who's responsible. That's what I want to get down to, that, just to be frank. And so if it is a community member who is advocating on the behalf, please tell them to include that. And the best way to do that is the same as all the other complaints. Go to the independent monitor's office and they will give it to us and we'll investigate it.
Thank you, April. And Karen, you mind holding that question for a few more minutes? I'm gonna go to this second question just to make sure we have enough time to cover it, but I won't forget. The second one, Director Robinson, is provide an explanation or the purpose of operations and stakeholders involved in the Department of Safety's new Transformation and Policy Division.
Excellent. So the purpose of the Transformation and Policy Division, if you go in it seems so long ago, but if you go back to last year, during the height of the George Floyd protest, I felt as though we needed to do something that would be a vehicle in my office to not only address some of the issues that we were seeing, but also to be a sustainable solution and a vehicle to take policies and implement them, not just to what I say, implement the flavor of the day and be done. That is often what policymakers do, or politicians do, or appointees even do. And what I wanted to do was make sure that we had an office within the executive director's office, that civilian oversight, which, by the way, many people are trying to get to where we're at, where we've been for years with civilian oversight. And I wanted to take that to the next level, which was to have an office that could look into, research, and implement policy changes as they come to us, not just from the community, but also from our staff, also from the research that we're doing. And so that is what the Transformation Policy Team is. They have three major goals. That's number one, it's to strengthen communication and engagement, to support positions in relating to public safety personnel in the community that we serve. And number two, to enhance the oversight and advance the criminal justice reform efforts and equitable practices within our criminal justice system, and also to advance community policing and crime reduction strategies to support the safety and well-being of Denver's diverse neighborhoods. And so those are the three main tenets of our time right now. I hope that the Transformation Policy Division evolves, and it evolves with the community, and we can make it what we all want and need for our community. But right now, those are the main areas in which we're focused on. There's a number of tenets all throughout, and I won't go through those now. But in terms of who's involved, Emily Locke is my director. And I should say this, I've gotten a lot of criticism by folks that I didn't put this out into the community and hire a bunch of community folks and all of that. I want people to understand that, number one, I created the Transformation Policy Division when we were in a time of no money. And we we were fortunate, I should say, we are really fortunate that we had internal people that I was able to leverage that are experts at what they do. Emily Locke actually went through a competitive process with external stakeholders, with all kinds of folks that also applied for her position. But we were fortunate enough to already have her in place, that she knows Denver. And so Emily became our director. We have folks that used to be, that worked on a number of different initiatives of my predecessor, and they are now in the Transformation and Policy Office, as well as the other folks we partner with is City Council and COB, and the Office of Human Rights and Community Partnership has been a huge partner to us. But also Elise Ron, who is our Government Affairs and Community Affairs Director or Manager, is also helping to mobilize the community so that we are in the community hearing from them constantly. And the community is a loaded word, because the word community really encompasses everyone. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to get into the neighborhoods. We're trying to get into the places where people are and hear what they are feeling or seeing or wanting to have as a part of their Department of Public Safety. So I'll stop there, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I will we'll take Karen's question, and then we'll open it up for a couple of questions from COB panel, and then we'll go to community. You're on mute, Karen.
Pardon me. Director, is it your understanding that the policies for PID, AI, and CRU are now in final draft, that the policy has actually been finalized?
Thank you, Karen, for your question. And so just to clarify, CRU and AIU are part of PID. PID is the overarching. PID is the CRU and CIU. So I just want to clarify that. So the first draft of policies, yes, I signed because I had to last year, based on state law. But as you all know, I provided you with a draft to look at and mull over and tell me what else you wanted to include. Like I've said over and over, I believe these policies are fluid documents. I think all policies should be fluid documents, and we should always be working to improve them. And so that's why I told my staff, take another stab at it. They have done so. They've given you all that. What else we need? I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead. Oh, I think that was a mistake. So, they gave you all the red line version of what we had, and now it's in your hands. And I'm waiting. I can't wait to talk with you all about what your thoughts are.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Any other COB members that have any questions for Director Robinson on either one of those two subjects?
Steph.
All right. We'll go to community questions.
Yeah, I did have one.
Sorry about that, Stefan. Didn't see you on this.
No problem, Al. So I wanted to follow up on this subject of the misconduct allegations and then the results. There are a lot of acronyms there that a lot of us are familiar with, that of course, Director, you're familiar with and your staff is familiar with, but the public is not. And it's hard. We have a limited number of people on this call who can attend it. I mean, one thing we've talked to Emily about, and she's been receptive to it, is creating, I think it would be great to create a flow chart for the public on a web page that explains the entire disciplinary process, whether it involves the sheriffs or the police department. The public is very interested in that. And I think then if you have a document or documents up there that explain all this, at each of our meetings, we can refer people to this flow chart, and then they can follow the process. And with legends that explain each of the acronyms, and that CRU and AIU are all part of PID, what it is. Then you have GERT, which is completely different, and it's very confusing even for us. So the sooner we can get that in place, that's better for the public, for transparency and accountability. Also, and I noticed a lot of questions in the chat, I mean, I think that we've also talked to Emily about then providing on that same webpage information about the results of investigations, so that the public is aware of, for example, there's a lot of interest in knowing the results of any misconduct allegations against officers arising out of the protests last year. And whether any misconduct allegations have been made, what have there been investigations, and what determinations there are. Just again, if it could be organized by time period or whatever, I just think that make it easy for the public to follow these types of things. And again, I think will improve transparency tremendously and the credibility of the department.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. I appreciate that. I will tell you, number one, first and foremost, that graphic that you're talking about, that flow chart, I've also asked for, and I'm going to ask Emily to have that posted. I'm just going to say, Emily, let's have that posted by end of this month. And so we will create that if it's not created already, Steph, and we'll have that by the 30th on our website. And so you have my word on that. It doesn't take rocket science to put this on. So that's why I'm giving you a date. I just want it done. And so we'll have that done by the 30th. The other one, Steph, I have had multiple meetings about on what we can and cannot post online, and what we should be able to post online. And I've been working through that process with the city attorney's office and human resources and all the folks involved with that process and what that looks like. And so know that we are working towards a yes. I'm just trying to figure out what that looks like. And so I will keep you updated on that. And I will, at the next meeting, I will give you an update on where we're at on it. Because I did hear you, I do believe you guys put that on my radar about a month ago, and I have had meetings on it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Director Robinson, for committing to doing that. And of course, you know that we will follow up on that. But we trust your office will take care of that. So thank you.
Al, I did fail to mention one thing. Can I say with this
Sure.
real quick that
Sure.
when it comes to an investigation, especially in the police or the sheriff's office, the independent monitor must sign off on any investigation as thorough and complete before it even moves forward in the process. And that's important to know because there is no investigation that ends before the independent monitor gets to put his stamp on it. And so know that that's the case. And that's so Katina, I see you shaking your head. Tell me.
What I was thinking about, Director Robinson, is that the monitor doesn't always give the stamp of approval that every investigation is thorough and complete. They may raise objections that get heard and reasonable minds differ, and then the case proceeds. The monitor makes recommendations. So I guess the monitor's not here, unfortunately, so we'll have to probably table this, but I just don't want there to be this impression that the monitor's stamping everything's okay in every case, because that actually isn't how.
So I think, Katina, what you're referencing is the end of the process. He gives his recommendations at the end of the process, but before the process's investigation's over, he does sign off that it is thorough and complete, because that is part of, I think that's part of and I have been told this over and over and over again, and I've seen the documentation. And so I will research that myself, and we'll talk about it the next time. Just to make sure.
Sounds good.
Make sure I'm being accurate. But and if that is not happening, I apologize that I misspoke.
Thank you. I want to make sure we keep the community engaged. So I'll go to April now and take a couple of questions from the community, please. April.
Actually, I think we might want to address our last question that we submitted to Director Robinson, because some of the community questions lead into that.
Got it. Okay, great. I'll do that. The last question was an update on a community-facing dashboard proposed by the department to detail reforms being implemented.
Yes, I'm actually going to pivot to Emily Locke to take this one and go over what she's done with this dashboard.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all again. Thanks for having us. I'm very excited to actually give you a demo of the dashboard prototype that has been put together in response to the Community Task Force 112 recommendations for reimagining policing and public safety here in Denver. So bear with me, please, while I share my screen. Oh, I am disabled from sharing my screen, unfortunately. I'm not sure if.
I think we can remedy that.
Thank you.
There.
All right, try again. There we go. Let me get to the right screen. All right, sharing, and please let me know if you can now see a blue bar across the top, that spreadsheet looking type document, hopefully. Basically, our goal here is that we have many city agencies involved in reviewing and responding to the 112 recommendations that have been provided by the Community Task Force. And so our goal was to create a tool that can be very centralized and very straightforward and easy to follow along in terms of seeing both by each recommendation itself and what our response is. But additionally, the Community Task Force took great care to group their recommendations into 5 separate strategy themes. And so we also wanted the reviewer to be able to take a look at responses across those strategies, as well as, again, by each recommendation specifically. So this is purely a sample dashboard. We have no responses loaded in. So any information you see here in terms of status and the response link demonstration that I'll give you, Please note that these are still in work and still under review. So this is absolutely not final determinations by the different city agencies and the executives in the city, but we wanted to illustrate this is what we hope this dashboard can provide to community regarding the work the city is doing. And we're absolutely welcoming of feedback to make sure that our formatting and our languaging and the way that we are approaching this dashboard is useful and helpful for you. So to start across the left, you can see there, the far left, there's numbers that will run down the column. And so you will see each recommendation's number. Next, you'll see the strategy that is coded with the recommendation. And then in the third column, about the middle of my screen, you have the recommendation itself. Next, you'll see a status review, or I'm sorry, a status column. So as responses are finalized and completed and loaded up into the dashboard, you'll see those under review statuses change to will implement, previously implemented, decline to implement. And I believe we have a fourth category that's an other. And so right now that's where we're sort of grouping things. We want to leave that open as an other response available, just in case it doesn't fit into those identified categories. So what you'll see on the top right in those yellow buttons is that you can sort. So right now, when you have all three of these clicked, you can see all recommendations regardless of status. But then you can also sort it by just clicking on and removing out, for example, those that are under review. So you can see then and just sort on a listing of the recommendations that will be implemented once those statuses are updated. So for our purposes for tonight, what I'd like to do, first we'll focus on for those that will be declined to implement as the response, we're going to provide a reason why, and then you'll see in this final column over here additional information. But we are also identifying the leading agency for all recommendations. As you know, having read the report, there's a really vast array of work and concerns that have been brought forward by the Community Task Force that are broader than just the work of our public safety agencies alone. And so we've engaged many different city agencies and partners to work with us in responding to the recommendations. And so we want to make sure that it's very clear for the community which agency is leading the work in the areas of homelessness resolution, for example, or for human services and access to benefits and things of that nature. So then finally, this last column, which is a little hard to see behind the filters and slicers, but it's basically the response link. So this will be the most important column. As we are posting the response for each recommendation, we're going to provide context, background information, and supporting information around that response. So what I'd like to do is sort for you now just a few examples of what that will look like. So again, these are samples and examples, but we're hoping for your feedback to make sure we're on the right track. So for example, where we have a recommendation, like several recommendations that have requested information around access to resource directories or maps, particularly for community-based resources, or for providing resource avenues for individuals who are released from incarceration and re-entering back into community. Those are topics identified in multiple recommendations. So one of our goals is, where possible, how can we make those resource directories and accesses available to community? So where possible, we're looking to design interactive, searchable, accessible, and updatable map-based resource directories instead of static paper directories that can become outdated or can become lost and one has to have on hand. Instead, this can just be a hyperlink. So just quite quickly, I'll give you an example. Here, you can search something right near you. We will say 202. So we'll just take a look at this random address that just happened to pop up. You can zoom out and see what types of resources are available within whatever radius that you set, whether it's walkable, drivable, public transportation is noted on here, as well as medical facilities. And so we are actively working with our city agencies, as well as the community commissioners from the Human Rights and Community Partnerships Commissions, to identify what are community-based resources, particularly culturally preferred resources to have available to community through this interactive type format. So we absolutely would welcome feedback from you as well, as far as resources and referrals that you would like to see in this map, or the types of information you'd like to see in this map as well. So turning back to the dashboard, so in other recommendations, many of those touch on specific policy documents, whether this is a policy written in an operations manual from the police and sheriff's department, or a documented departmental procedure. So where that is the case, what we are proposing is to have, as part of our response, actual hyperlinks directly into the relevant policy language, so that you don't need to go and search for the police department or the sheriff's department website, find the link to find where an operations manual is, for example, and then skim down to find the right policy. Our idea here is we want to make this as centralized and as easy as possible for people to get the information related to the response to that recommendation. So you can see here, for example, a policy related to search and seizure from the operations manual of the police department, specifically then some highlighted language around persons who have a First Amendment right to record things in a public location. Let's see. Next, we also have a second example of that, just to show, I know use of force and sanctity of life and duty to intervene are concepts that are very top of mind for many of our community members, as well as throughout the recommendations themselves. So just to highlight another example where we would link to, again, and it would be both our police and our sheriff's department, even though the recommendations in some places specifically reference only the police department, we felt that it's very important to expand our review response to also include our Denver Sheriff's Department as well in their law enforcement capacity. So then just a couple other quick examples of the types of responsive information that we are hoping to provide. Where we have city agencies that have built out ongoing reporting information, or say resource or application portals to access benefits and things of that nature. Again, we want to make it really straightforward for a person reviewing this information to connect directly into that information. So for example, several recommendations refer to persons experiencing homelessness and a need to prioritize efforts to provide permanent supportive housing for individuals, either as they're re-entering into community after being in custody in our facilities, or even at the point of actual contact with any of our law enforcement officers, how can we ensure that we can do our best to make meaningful attempts to connect folks with housing. So one example here where we would be able to provide, again, that centrally connected, easy link to the work of our partner agencies, and I apologize, it is a dashboard that is publicly available, so it'll take us just a moment to load. But this is actually information that's produced and available by our city's Department of Housing Stability. So just these first couple screens are informational and definitions. But for example, recommendations that request information about the city's efforts around housing efforts. So we've got this great dashboard with lots of information that our partners at Host have created to make available. So this is our way of helping amplify that message that they are putting out there about the work that they are doing, as well as, again, our review and response in the work, and where we as public safety can make sure that we're doing everything we can to support that work and support those community members who need those resources. And then the final example that I would like to share with you tonight is that where we have, and this is actually a specific call that I heard from I believe your last quarterly forum with Chief Kazin. We had some community questions where folks were asking about the ability to have more information where our agencies are implementing programs that are considered best practices or model programs by outside entities. People would like to have that information so that they can do that research themselves. They can see that information and understand without just taking our word for it. So directly in response to those suggestions from this board and from community members, one of the features we would like to include in this responsive dashboard is exactly that. So an example here, I believe many of you heard about the work that our police and sheriff's departments are doing in partnership with Georgetown University for the Active Bystandership in Law Enforcement program, or ABLE program, which really is a change management program and a cultural change management program around that duty to intervene and what that means in a law enforcement setting. So what we would propose to do is provide a link to a website just like this. That's an external website through the Georgetown Law School that can explain the background of the program, the board that oversees it, the persons that developed the curricula, what the community standards are for an agency to be accepted into those programs. So again, just to help with that external legitimacy so that people who are more interested in that type of background information can have that readily available to them. So with that, I think the final thing that I will leave you with tonight is that I know when we last spoke, lots of discussion about specifically, we want to know what's the timeline. We want to know when we can expect this. So 2 points. Number one is that we're deeply in the middle of the process. We're actually working in collaboration with the task force. We have a substantial number of questions outstanding to the task force to make sure that we understand the recommendations that they have offered. And so we will not have finalized responses on those recommendations until we know and we've confirmed with them and done that collaborative dialogue with them. So as soon as we are in a place where we have additional recommendations or recommendations, I should say, that we have in a final place, that we know that we're on the same page with the task force, that we understand their intent and the ask of the recommendation, and we have that whole complete response prepared, then our goal is to start populating the dashboard and to update that, I believe, every other month to make sure that we have a substantive push of updates of new recommendations, and then also provide ongoing updates through entities such as the Citizens Oversight Board, City Council, and other forums to be able to update then in the interim. So with that, I will pause. Questions, comments, feedback on the format of the dashboard. And I should also note too that this is the first of many different data and accessibility tools that our team is working on and hoping to roll out to you and to the community. We've spoken with you and we've heard from many community members at meetings about different types of reports and dashboards that they feel would be beneficial and be helpful. So we're excited that this will just be the start of ongoing rollout of those data tools and feedback like that. So I do hope that this would be an appropriate mechanism when we are doing our check-ins and our updates with this board, that we might be able to preview future data tools and things as well to get that feedback and those suggestions as well about content that would be helpful and useful.
Thank you so much, Emily, for that update. That was really helpful in kind of giving context on the progress of the dashboard and kind of addressing several questions came in about the recommendations and how those were going to be incorporated into the dashboard. I had a few kind of personal follow-up questions, and then I will integrate some of the questions that just came in as well. I think I heard that you said you're working with the task force to better understand these recommendations, because my fear is that declined reason area of just making sure that we know the spirit of the people who created those recommendations. I think some are here in the audience, and I don't want that just declined and kind of written off without maybe some of their insights as well. So I think that's what I heard, that you are consulting with them, and I just wanted to kind of confirm that.
Yes, and I apologize. My technical difficulties, I'm trying to figure out how to unshare the screen now so I can be back with you. So in the meantime, yes, we are collaborating directly with the task force. We actually were on a really good cadence of being able to coordinate monthly check-in meetings with them. So now we are, let's see. Oh, I think my screen is now stopped. Thank you so much for whoever did that. I appreciate it. So we're working with the task force to be able to schedule. It's a very large group, and we are trying to be extremely respectful, knowing their capacity and the scheduling difficulties that come with scheduling a large group, to actually sit down and have a dialogue with more than just a few representatives, to be able to sit down with the group as a whole. So we're working on scheduling that. We also sent over at the very beginning of August, I believe, a pretty substantive list of questions. I believe we've also provided that to you. And so we're in communication with the task force about their progress in working through those questions, a cadence for when we can start to see answers back, and if we need to clarify any of the clarifying questions and all of that work. And it's also important to us as well that we work through a process of the task force themselves, for example, specifically hand delivered their report to us and to city leadership to demonstrate their commitment and the level of importance that they placed on this work. And so we're also working through, so what is the best and most appropriate way that we can also show that same respect back to the community task force and the number of hours that they have put into not only designing, but refining and really organizing their work, so that we can make sure that we're respectful of their efforts and we're engaged in dialogue and relationship repairing and building with them. And then also, how do we bring the broader community into that as well, for those who were not part of that task force and who are interested in being part of these conversations and the implementation and moving forward.
Can I also add something to that, April, is that I think one thing that I have been really encouraged about is that I feel like our teams have come together, the task force group and our staff, and frankly, all the other city employees, to really, really focus in on and take these 112 recommendations seriously. I have had so many meetings about these recommendations, and we are going through every single one with a fine-tooth comb, because at the end of the day, I hope to say that we have gone through it so much that we are all proud, all of us, to include the task force members, all proud of the work that we have done to implement what we can on the task force recommendations. I think that there is absolutely fruit there. There is absolutely things that were recommended that we can implement, and I'm looking forward to doing so. But it is harder to operationalize things that are just policy, or not policy, but recommendations. And so that's what we're doing now. It takes a little time, but we have to figure out how to operationalize it. But I'm encouraged with the partnership and encouraged with my staff and how serious not only my staff, but also the other staff members of the city are taking this, not just public safety, but even people like Dottie or people like Human Rights Community Partnerships. I mean, it's just been an amazing thing to see.
And one other personal comment or recommendation I have, just as we're kind of finalizing that dashboard, I know the city has an office focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Just reviewing that dashboard for like accessibility, I think is important. I know I'm personally trying to check my ableism, and as you were presenting that dashboard, there was a lot that may need to be revamped. So just kind of a recommendation for there to make sure it's really accessible to community.
That's a great call.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that point. That's actually something I know I've been in dialogue with Elise, as well as our other kind of the group of us that are coordinating the responsiveness, the response effort, to make sure that we have a mind towards accessibility. So before the dashboard is published, it will undergo a thorough review to make sure that we meet all ADA accessibility standards. I know some of the work that we did last year around the COVID testing site, we partnered with the Human Rights and Community Partnerships to be able to provide instructional information in American Sign Language, for example, in a video that was embedded within that website. So I'm absolutely going to work with them and then the Mayor's Office of Social Equity and Innovation for any opportunities that we can make this more accessible. And again, we welcome any feedback. The idea is absolutely, please help us be as inclusive as possible.
Okay, and going back to the community questions, I know we've been talking about several different dashboards and just better community facing information. And several people have asked about just a dashboard or again, community facing updates on the officers who were held accountable for the protests last summer, and how many were fired, suspended, charged as a result of the protest. And I think we've talked with Chief Payson as well about what this dashboard would look like of being transparent about the disciplinary processes on a website that people can read and access. So that's also kind of coming up once again.
Sure.
No, we
Well, let me say this and then I'll give it to you, Emily. Number one, I think transparency is important, but I also think due process is as well. And we are far away from, you know, all the litigation and all the things that are coming from what the bad and the ugly that happened last summer. And so I have to say that I would like to do something to that nature, but I also want to make sure we do process for the officers, making sure they have that we go through that process, but also that we have to hear from the city attorney's office on what's allowed, we're allowed to do. So Emily, go ahead. I know you've had more conversations on this than I have.
Nope, I was just going to follow up and say exactly that. It's a very hard balance. This is, and I know, and I do thank you for those board members who have provided me with examples of what other groups and other jurisdictions have done specifically around complaints, investigations, and discipline reporting, because that really helps us with our conversations internally to show this is what others are doing. Why could we or couldn't we do something similar? So I'm actually very encouraged that I think we're going to be able to start posting some of those things. We are definitely working through those conversations with the city attorney's office, with our agencies. I think we will, sorry, I'm seeing comments pop up there. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. So we're definitely going to start. I think it's important to me that we start somewhere. We start with a bit, and then we do that constant feedback with all the different sides that are there and say, okay, how can we expand this? How can we increase the information available and the appropriate type of information available as well? And I absolutely understand that when our historical policy and practice has been to provide very little or to not provide much at all, really, then I understand why it's a difficult conversation for both, just to understand why can't you give me, and then also, but why should we change? And so we're absolutely working through that. And I think we're gonna get to a point where we will definitely have information available. It's to the executive director's point, it's that balance of making sure it's the right level, the appropriate level of the information that's also useful and helpful.
Yeah, I think we had the OIM reports about the recommendations following the protest, and that there were people who acted in bad faith. And that came out in December, January. And here we are over a year later following the protest and can't give much back to the community about what's happened. So I know me personally just wanting to push for that level of just transparency of community of what's happened since each of those time markers.
So I do want to say this, though, that the cases are continuing to be investigated and all those things. That takes time because there are so many, so much happened during that time. But I would also say that the independent monitors report, I told the chief that he had just a couple weeks, if not months, to answer and give answers on when those things would be implemented. All that stuff is posted online. Everything from the independent monitors report, the police department has said what they did in answer to what the independent monitor found. And so know that is posted online on the police department's website. And then I will also follow up and make sure that those things are transparent there. But that report was taken very, very seriously. I leaned on the police chief to make sure that those things were posted, but also dealt with the issues that were found.
Sure, and I'm just getting a flood of responses of just information like how many cases are open. If that could be provided to people who are here, that would be something in terms of the numbers, even if they haven't been fully resolved just yet.
Sure, I don't have it off the top of my head, and so actually. Elise, would you just circle back with the COB and provide that number for me? Because I don't know. I don't have that kind of information.
And sorry, going back to the 112 community recommendations, somebody just made a comment, and again, I'll read it verbatim. I'm not sure that community or all members of the task force agree with this categorization of the city's response and action or lack thereof as it relates to the 112 recommendations for the record. So again, I think this might just be a call for just making sure we're integrating various people of the task force and community as we are looking at this. And I don't know if there's a response to that.
Yeah, my response to that would be they must not be talking to the chair or their leadership of the task force, because we have been heavily involved with making sure we're talking to the task force and talking to the community and working on this heavily. So I won't take that we haven't been working on it, because it has been a heavy lift for us, and I have dedicated a lot of resources to that. So has the mayor. The mayor's office has a person who's in charge of this. He has designated whole parts of divisions on this. He has attorneys on this. I mean, it's been a big lift, and so I respectfully disagree.
This may, thank you, Director Robinson. This may be a good chance, moment to interject and just read to you a statement from the Citizens Oversight Board, directly kind of addressing those 112 recommendations. The COB was encouraged to see the community come together with such comprehensive and thoughtful recommendations to improve public safety in the city. There are a few recommendations we'd like to engage on with the group to help understand better. A few also assume that the internal investigation and oversight groups within the department are more effective than they are. As a result, we have some ideas on how these might be enhanced. And this statement was born out of the work that the Citizens Oversight Board put into reading over each and every one of those recommendations. And we came away with, of course, as the statement reads, wholly understanding a lot of those, and some of them we need to dive in a little bit more so that the community knows that the COB is actively engaged in reviewing each one of those recommendations thoroughly and crafting thoughts and ideas around the ones that we think that we can come alongside and provide information to the community in the spaces where we think further explanation may be needed. So just wanted to interject that so that the community knows where we stand as a Citizens Oversight Board. Thank you, April.
Are there any COB related questions as I just scroll through and make sure we're addressing community questions?
Just a follow
Julia?
up. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a follow up to the questions on data. You know, I know COB asks pretty regularly for information from the various public safety departments and, you know, the Department of Public Safety itself. I'd asked to, in the fulfillment of our requests and the community requests tonight, that we look at sort of ongoing real time or, you know, live fed data sharing. It is tiresome to have to ask for the same information over and over based on, you know, different time periods. We'll ask for it in the spring, we'll get the spring version, we ask for it in the fall, we get the fall version, right? But what is the way to share this data on an ongoing and open basis? I'll also say that it seems like, you know, in the dashboard, you've linked to various policies, and perhaps there's a summary version of information about how many violations of that policy have taken place. You know, so if you're saying, here's the use of force policy, maybe what we can do in addition to that is, here are the number of, you know, outstanding investigations or disciplinary actions as a result of use of force. And I am not asking for the names of those officers necessarily, but a number is helpful to the community. Is it 1,000? Is it 1? You know, what's the scale of information that we're dealing with? I think, you know, going to a link in an 800-page operations manual is only so useful to the community, but what is information that they can take action on and hold the department accountable as a result.
Julia, I loved Ms. Richmond, or should I say, Madam Vice Chair, I love all of your recommendations, and I would ask Emily to bring forth the fruit of those recommendations next month. And so give us 1 month to figure out how to do everything you just said. I think that was valuable. I like it. So Emily, would you have that prepared for the COB next month? And then I think we talked about this, and I apologize if I didn't follow up on this, but I absolutely believe that you all should have access to that reoccurring data stream without having to ask for it. So Emily, that piece of that, let's just solidify what the COB wants to see, and then we'll make sure that's just reoccurring.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nope, I was just going to say we can set that up. We can work with Elise and all of you to determine what would be most helpful and in what cadence that is to get that reporting. And we can figure out the best vehicle to get that to you on a regular basis. So you don't need to make ongoing requests. Absolutely.
Thank you. We are, and thank you for that question, Julia. We are 10 minutes out from the end of our forum. So I want to leave a couple more minutes to be able to address some community questions, and then I will come back with 3 other items before we end this public forum.
Sorry, I usually try to catch themes.
No problem, no problem. I know your hands are full.
Yeah, we just have a lot of sporadic ones, so I'll just try as best as possible to address some of these. Again, I think there's concerns about vaccination efforts at the jail. Somebody said it's been negligent. For months, the vaccine became available, but people are being booked and placed into pods without quarantine. And just asking about kind of the testing process, the quarantine process, and the vaccination process for those in the jail. And then also kind of circling back, what will the consequences be for public safety personnel who don't get the vaccine?
Yeah, so I can answer the last one, but the first ones are best suited for the sheriff. I don't know the nitty gritty of, you know, the operations of who's required to get a vaccine, who's not required to get a vaccine at the jail in terms of the inmates. And then, you know, I know that they used to test each person. I'm not going to speak to that. So I would ask that those questions be given to the sheriff.
That's why I was going to pause, but sorry. I wanted to make sure it was highlighted.
I was going to try, but then when we start getting really deep, I said we better ask him. But I will say this, there's a consequence for all city employees for not getting the vaccine, and that is a suspension first, and then if they don't get it within a certain time, it's termination.
Then, sorry, Al.
I'm sorry. This is just on the heels of that, real quick. I've seen in the news and a couple other sources as well, has been approached by a couple of community members about the number of DPD officers and sheriff officers who are utilizing the religious reasons as well as some health reasons. A large number, mainly of DPD officers that have claimed religious exemptions, and it's keeping the city attorney's office pretty busy trying to vet those out. I would guess from your perspective, what would you think is an acceptable time frame to really come to some type of a conclusion on some of these open cases? Because there are more than 400, I believe, from the last time I checked, and that's quite a bit to go through, and that could end up being weeks or even months, which then leave unsafe conditions open for the citizenry to come in contact with officers who are unvaccinated. So I'm just curious what your position is on that, and kind of in terms of the amount of urgency on that.
So that direction does not come from me. It actually comes from the mayor. and that is that by the date certain, which is I believe the 30th, all of those will have been vetted out and done. The city attorneys is working diligently now to make sure the exemptions, the people that need the exemptions have the exemptions, that have accurate exemption paperwork, get those exemptions. But by the time that clock turns to the 1st of October, if someone did not get an exemption and or they did not get the medical or the religious exemption, or they did not upload their vaccination stuff, that they will then move to the disciplinary process.
Thank you, Director. Okay, April.
Oh, now I forgot where I was going.
Uh-oh. Well, I'll do this while you're searching some of those out. I will take a moment to let the community know that we have 2 open positions on the Citizens Oversight Board. We've had 2 members that have been on for a long time and has served diligently, and and are moving on from the board, but dare I say on from the work, as I'm sure we'll still see both of them very active in the community. And so those 2 positions are open. If you are interested, go to the Boards and Commissions page, and you will find the information on there, and feel free to apply and get into the process, because we're always looking for good members. Okay.
Okay, I got it. Going back to Emily, where will people be able to find the dashboard when it's first published? We can ask you, but also when that dashboard is shared, we can probably send it out via our listserv and our website as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I apologize. That's the very first thing I should have led with. This will be available right off the main Department of Safety webpage. And then we're also working through developing communications plan around when we do update responses in the dashboard, when we do have progress updates to make, how can we communicate those out? And absolutely, if the COB could partner with us and help amplify that communication and get the word out, that would be extremely helpful. Because we want to make sure that, again, people know where it is and are able to access it. And if there are any concerns with accessibility in any way, definitely let us know so that we can correct those and make sure that it's more inclusive.
All right. I'll give one more announcement here, before April takes one last question, as we're about 3 minutes from time. Also want to remind and let the community know that the OIM, the Independent Monitor Ballot Referendum, as many of you know, was successfully passed through City Council, and it will be on the ballot in November. More information is forthcoming regarding some of the intricacies of the process that will go on in the upcoming election for the November 2nd election. But want to let the community know that was successful. And what this does is currently the mayor appoints the independent monitor, and the Citizens Oversight Board is tasked with managing the effectiveness of that office. With this November 2nd referendum, the COB, or the Citizens Oversight Board, will be now the main appointing body along with the City Council. So I think that's a step in the right direction to ensuring that Denver has a truly independent monitor and as they come alongside investigations. So there's also a link. Thank you, Julia. There's a link to the city's website on this particular topic, and it is in the chat for those of you who are able to get to that. And that link will direct you to the information that you would need regarding the referendum. And we'll take one last question from April, from the community.
I don't know if we have a good final question. I would just like to, well, maybe. Somebody just wrote, I can't find the existing dashboard for the OIM recommendation implementation status. Can you please share?
Okay, we
Um,
will,
we might have to circle back on that one.
okay,
I
okay,
can pull that up on the website right now as we're finishing up.
Okay.
perfect.
But yeah, I don't know if we have a final closing question.
Okay.
I know I personally would just want to thank community for their engagement. Just again, know that this isn't the only opportunity you have to engage with us at these quarterly public forums, that our COB meetings are twice a month, and you're more than welcome to join on the COB website and again, engage and participate with us if there are questions in between these quarterly public forums. You know, Director Robinson attends on a regular basis, as well as Sheriff Diggins and Chief Payson. So it's not just these quarterly forums that you can attend and participate in. We'd love to see you there as well.
Bingo, you took the words right out of my mouth.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad you did. Thank you. You've had, I want to thank you, April, for managing the questions coming in tonight. It's different when we're in person. Those of you who have attended the quarterly public forums before, where there's a mic and you just come up to the mic and ask the questions, it's quite involved to kind of do it like this. So thank you, April. Thank you to the Citizens Oversight Board, to those members that joined tonight and participated in this. Thank you, Director Robinson and staff for coming and fielding questions and providing us with more information. And keep in mind that we do have the links in the chat for you to find out more information about the upcoming referendum. And also, lastly, those community members out there who are very interested in this work and have a heart for trying to do this work, please do go and apply for 2 of these open positions. Thanks, everyone, and have a good night.